do I mean that you've always been working semiotically? This is the first time I have thought about semiotics. Okay, calm down. If you are a visual communicator in design or illustration, you work visually. Humans are hardwired to look for meaning in visuals. Creatives craft outcomes to visually communicate something to someone. Semiosis, semiotic sign action, is the theoretical framework to enhance what you already do. Let's now explore how with a design example. Welcome to episode 19, the penultimate REDUX episode of Semiosis 101's season 3. In the last episode, I explained the application of semiosis in illustration. In this episode, I will focus on the application of semiosis with an example from graphic design. Last week, I used illustrations I had created. This week, I will use an example from London-based Hudson Fuggle from their London Bridge City Christmas by the River 2021 Festival Designs. A big thank you to co-director Ian Fuggle for permission to use the Hudson Fuggle's work as an example on Semiosis 101. Before I can continue, I must caveat this episode. Unlike the illustration example where I discussed how I actually applied semiosis, this episode will deconstruct where semiosis is present. Hit subscribe to this YouTube channel and I will explain. Hudson Fuggle have a regular commission from the London Bridge City to design and brand the theme for each year's Winter by the River Festival by London's famous Tower Bridge. In 2021, the festival theme developed into a storybook approach. Do you see any connections between last week's illustration example and this design example? So if you are sitting comfortably, I will begin to tell a tale of tacit application of semiosis. I say tacit as I know that the Hudson Fuggle designers just designed. I did say at the beginning of this episode that you creators have always been working semiotically. Do you also remember from past episodes where I have discussed the semiotic determination flow? I've used a macro level analogy of client, creative, audience to provide you with a familiar analogue. Well, to begin my tale of deconstructing where semiosis is present in the design example, let us begin with that macro level analogy of client, creative, audience. In autumn 2021, Hudson Fuggle's client, London Bridge City, commissioned the designers to help bring the magic back to the capital's largest free winter festival. In semiotic terms, let us call this the concept to be visually communicated to the target audience. Contextually, Christmas 2021 was the first Christmas after the beginning of the 2020 COVID pandemic that people could mix again in the open air. The client's concept of bring the magic back for Christmas was the challenge. The design team ideated lots of potential ways to convey this to Londoners and tourists who now could socialise, still within COVID restrictions. The designers hit a big idea. The Hudson Fuggle team were provided with 3 festive woodland creatures, a robin, a fox and a stag, as the client had already commissioned 3 6-metre sculptures for the festival. The way they decided to convey the client's concept was to use these 3 characters to represent the festival's target audience. The big story to be told through the design work would be a re-emergence of society for Christmas 2021 from the shadows cast by 2020's lockdown. The 3 picture book characters were intended to brighten even the darkest December day. This representation to the audience of the concept would take the forms of animated films, environmental branding, competitions, social media content. A variety of different media formats for the visual communication of the client's concept to entice the audience to physically visit London Bridge City area. So far so good. The 3 animal characters designs utilise silhouettes of the familiar animal shapes. The animations and compositions gave the animal silhouettes a sense of existent reality through their animated movements and composed presence. To be technical here, with Peirce in semiotic terms, the iconic representation of the animal shapes first provided a possible interpretation in the minds of the audience. Then once the audience were subconsciously satisfied they could identify the animals, the very same imagery begins to semiotically communicate at the next indexical representation level as a robin, a fox or a stag. Thus, moving from iconic to indexical representation is enabled by the audience. The silhouettes do not change. Their meaning remains dormant in plain sight. A silhouette only visually communicates meaning if the interpretation has an effect on the mind of the audience. Hudson Fuggle's representation of the client's concept ultimately needed to lead the desired action to get the audience to visit the festival. Therefore, the visual language of a fairy tale was employed across the festival's identity, print and digital engagement ideas. In the previous illustration example, I indicated where I applied Peirce's 10 classes of semiotic sign. So I will now deconstruct Hudson Fuggle's design to demonstrate where these 10 sign classes are also utilised. I say deconstruct as the designers designed as they normally would. However, tacitly they were working semiotically. There are a myriad of visual qualities that create the tone of voice and context for Christmas and winter. There are also a number of visual tropes that create a storybook and fairy tale vibe. Each of these visual elements are meaning-bearing sign wands. Sign wands are instant hits of possible meaning from familiar qualities. The dark gradients from gold to violet are familiar qualities to twilight winter skies as the sun sets. The glistening golden yellows are familiar qualities to warm winter fires in the hearth. Hands up who actually has a roaring fire anymore? Not many, eh? These sign wands' job is not to visually communicate all the intended concept at once. Peirce calls this instant hit of possible meaning a quali sign. This is semiotically weak and ephemeral, and its purpose is to trigger perception so that interpretation of meaning can begin. Once a quality is perceived as possibly familiar to something, the semiotic signs begin to mediate. Sign 1 hands over to sign 2 in the minds of the target audience when they think winter. However, the audience may interpret other meanings from a violet gradient. The addition of other sign wands in the gradient in the form of white specks could be possible stars. This nesting of semiotic signs with semiotic signs helps facilitate the audience to interpret meaning within a certain thematic latitude. So, if the audience of potential visitors are being successfully semiotically mediated, then sign 3 helps their interpretations to a possible existent thing, e.g. winter sky. The class of sign 4 has been described as a sign of direct experience. The audience's own lived experiences help them to subconsciously understand more of what the visual communications mean. Nothing has changed in the picture book visual language. However, the change is happening in the minds of the audience. The external signs mediating sky now continue internally. The same graduated colours now as a sign 4 class actually suggest in the audience's minds a winter twilight sky. The audience have knowledge of the existence of winter twilight sky, so when mediated within the designs, the audiences are satisfied that this is not a summer festival. Signs 5 to 10 move mediation from mere possibilities and suggestions towards general socially and culturally agreed meaning. Let's end this episode by focusing on the robin, fox and stag in the context of these 6 sign classes. These animals are intended to carry the bigger message of emergence into a social world again. The decision to silhouette the animals makes these characters general. The use of animal silhouettes in a city context creates a possibly familiar agreed vibe, sign 5, of having travelled from somewhere else. Up to a point, the silhouettes may or may not be fully identifiable as existent animals, just shapes of possible animals. If the robin hasn't yet been interpreted as a robin, sign 6 still enables the audience to agree on bird. Once sign 7 helps suggest it is a robin, the audience can subconsciously agree the existential connection to winter and Christmas. Classes signs 8 to 10 utilise the nested lower level sign classes to ensure the audience generally accepts these animals are proxies for other things like magic, merchants and visitors. Semiotically, as each audience member begins to realise the proxy meanings, they perceptually move from possibilities 8 and suggestions 9 to finally resolved meaning 10. In the final episode, I will review all Season 3 episodes. Patreon subscribers have access months in advance of YouTube to Season 4 episodes. Just saying, thanks for watching. Check out the other Semiosis 101 episodes, like and share them with your friends. And hit the bell and subscribe buttons to be notified when next week's free Semiosis 101 episode is published. You can also follow Semiosis 101 on the socials for updates. It is at Semiosis 101 on Instagram and Threads. See you all again next week for more Semiosis 101 to help illustrators and designers to enhance your visual communication skills.